Okay, now that we all got it, we can move on to say, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for January's edition of our Maker Roundtable. We're glad to have everybody here, see a few faces and a few black and white names for me. And so we will get rolling on here. It is a rainy day in Missouri. And, you know, with these, as many of you know, we don't generally have a big agenda or anything like that. And so if anybody has anything they want to start with, I will defer. If nobody has anything, I will throw some things out.
I do have kind of a question for the group. And I don't know if anyone on this call specifically will have ideas here, but I'm open to anything. We are, and Scout, I think you'll appreciate this. We finally have an opportunity to do some adaptive gaming work here, and an avenue to potentially get some funding to help with that. And just curious for anyone who has done adaptive gaming, what you would suggest for kind of our starting basic kit. We already have ordered an Xbox adaptive controller and a Switch set to go with that. Some mounting tools, modular hose, stuff like that. But stuff that has come up most frequently that you think, boy, you just got to have that. Including things that you might make.
I don't know if it'll help, but Justin Peasant commented that MMC was doing some adaptive gaming stuff. So they might have some insight. You could follow up with him.
Great point.
This is Kathy. You might also follow up with Ability Tools, which is the California AT program. That was doing that. And I know at one time, Georgia was doing quite a bit as well. So you might follow up with them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Catherine at in California is the contact probably for gaming there. And I can probably get you her email.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate it.
I could tell you that right now. It's Catherine with a K at cfilc.org.
There you go.
Could you repeat the back half of that? I've got Catherine with a K at
cfilc.org.
Got it. Thank you so much.
It's their main entity agency is the California Foundation for Independent Living. That's what the CFILC is.
Gotcha. That helps. Thank you.
Okay. I'd also like to introduce Courtney Knowles, who's CODA with the Maker program at IATP in Illinois. And Courtney's going to start joining in on some of these. And so I'll let her talk a little bit about, introduce herself, but just wanted to jump on and see where things were at. It's been quite a while since I was able to join in, but Courtney's now going to take this over and be a regular participant as her schedule allows.
Great.
Yeah, I'm going to try to register for as many classes as I can, or the webinars that you guys do. I had never heard about you guys until Kathy mentioned you, so it's nice to be here. I just started 3D printing about 9 months ago, so I knew nothing really about it. It's definitely a learning experience. And I was gonna say too, I think William, or do you go by Will?
Bill. Yeah, I should change that.
Sorry. No, it's okay. Have you seen the one-handed adapted controller for the Xbox?
I don't think so.
I sent the link to it here, but I came across it at one point and I thought it was really neat, especially with, you know, people who have like left side neglect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A long time ago, several console generations ago, there was a company that made a controller adapter called the Avenger adapter, that they tried to sell commercially. It never really went anywhere, but it looked very, very similar to this. That is cool.
And
And we
I
do,
also, I was gonna say, I also believe that, and I can be wrong on this because I am not a gamer, but I think that I did see something where Sony just released a new accessible controller at CES.
yeah, they did. I'm curious about that one. I can't wait to get my hands on it, so to speak. Microsoft has one. Sony just announced one. And so the Sony one only has, I believe, 4 mono jack inputs, whereas the Microsoft one has an input for every input on the controller. And then independent switches on that device for every button on the controller. So there's got to be some calculated reason why they only did 4 inputs. Maybe they looked at how many people are actually using on the XAC. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm really curious about that one.
Yeah. And Bill, have you met with the woman, I don't even know her name, in Maryville?
Yeah, we're old friends. Yep.
I think from
Betsy
what I've
Hawkins
heard-
Chernoff. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a great resource.
Yeah. Actually, one of my capstone students might be with her for a while.
Nice. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. And Courtney, good to have you. Glad to have folks join us, you know. with some-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Scout, we talked a while back of, as Courtney knows, I hate the terminology of a kit, but for lack of better wording, we did have to do some kits for our area agencies on aging that wanted just their low tech 3D printed items. And I know I was supposed to send you a list, which I haven't, so I'm going to pass that off to Courtney. We did go through what's in there now, Courtney, maybe 12 different items.
There's 17.
17, okay. So we went through multiple different ones. We eliminated some, you know, we modified some things. We eliminated some things because of the amount of filament they took or the time they took printing or whatever. So this was kind of a starter thing, but she
Great.
can email you. And Courtney, Scout is at the Missouri program, so he's your neighbor.
Awesome. Yeah, pretty much.
yeah. How many area agencies on aging do you have in Illinois?
13.
13.
Okay.
Have you heard of Printerior Designs in St. Louis?
What's it called?
Printerior Designs.
Uh-uh.
It's a recycling company. Someone just mentioned to me not long ago. I just reached out to them, which Kathy, they haven't gotten back to me yet, but I thought it was pretty interesting that they recycle filament and then they sell it too for cheap.
Yeah, so Courtney, let's make sure that they will take filament from out of state, because that wasn't very clear.
Yeah, I did. I emailed them and I gave them my phone number too
Okay.
for, you know, that we can ask those questions. So I'll do a follow-up email to you today.
Nice.
Oh, thanks for the email, Scout.
So I'm always curious, what kind of 3D printer did you get 9 months ago?
Oh, go ahead.
We're spoiled.
Yeah.
So we have some Ultimaker S5s. We have a few Ultimaker S3s. We have a Modix big 180X that we're just getting up and running to be able to do very large printed items.
That one.
And
Wow.
we have a Boss laser cutter, and we'll soon have the Mayhew multiplier for forming.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, so there'll be a busy team. We're trying to focus on individualized fabricated items. So our intent with sort of the more simple, low cost items is people would have access to the files, of course, and then be able to either print it themselves, use their local library to print it, or we do have a Maker Lab that has spun off out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, out of the business school. That's a nonprofit that would print them. And that our efforts stay focused on unique, individualized fabrication needs.
Okay.
So when are you picking up a 3D scanner?
Well, we can't decide which one we would go after, so and right now we have been getting by with some of the scanning apps on the iPad and stuff. So do you have a recommendation?
No, I don't. I've never seen anybody with a budget like yours before.
Well, it was a lot of leveraged funding is what brought that about. So
It just seemed natural since you're focused on personalized kinds of things that you can go very organic then. And scanning is your next step.
yeah. And I don't know, we've been all over the place on website issues. We've had a little bit of that discussion before, so I don't know if anybody has any input into that, but Thingiverse remains a nightmare for a variety of reasons. And we did multiple outreaches to them. And after, we were hopeful once they had that merger take place, that things would improve, and that hasn't been the case at all. It's probably gotten worse. So now we're back to trying to get things added and having them on our own website for the time being. I did have an interesting conversation with, I don't know if you're familiar with Jeremy at 3D Universe. So he started both 3D Universe along with the Enable program. Are you familiar with the Enable project? So they have a worldwide network set up for, and they started out doing prosthetics, hand prosthetics, and now they're looking to expand beyond that and do some more. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But in talking with him, so sort of the same nightmare around the website stuff. NIH now has a 3D website. I don't know if you were familiar with that.
No.
So they are moving their stuff. It's kind of buried. You would need to know about it. But from anybody looking for scientific stuff, it's worth checking out. And I want to say, let me double check here. I think it's just 3D. I want to say it's 3dprinting.nih.gov.
I think it's 3dprint.nih.gov.
Okay.
We've used that one.
But you might find that of interest, Ken.
Yeah, and I would throw right back at you. You should check out two places.
Okay.
One is Makers Making Change. This is-
Yeah, we're connected with them and have a chapter.
So they have a website too for you to post your stuff.
But they've also moved most of their stuff to Thingiverse.
But I would hope not. Thingiverse is kind of a dead end. And all my stuff now, if I'm actually keeping source somewhere, is at printables.com. It's just more robust site.
Okay.
I would still keep a presence on MMC's site.
Okay,
Even if you don't have your source files there, you should have an entry there among their devices. So I have entries there, but I often keep the source files on printables, so that's where people would obtain them. And all my documentation I keep on my own website.
okay. And what's the story with GitHub these days?
I mean, GitHub is a great place for developers to
For
work
detail.
in a common environment, to develop code and branch code and all that stuff. But my personal opinion is it's no place to serve as a repository for a final product. It's just too inaccessible to the typical person.
Okay,
But if you're developing code and you're developing code as a team, that's a great place.
thank you.
All right. Some good information. All right, so anybody else have anything that, you know, any topics that they want to bring up? And I am going to ask, is anybody new this month?
This is my first meeting.
Okay.
My name's Jason. I work at Rutgers.
Oh, okay. Great. And I think that are you part of the presentation that Mike Murata is kind of co-hosting?
No, I saw an email. I thought it was interesting. I clicked the link.
Okay. Well, great. And do you want to share anything about, you know, your background with us? Anything going on like?
So I work at Disability Services at Rutgers. I do 3D print. I've been 3D printing for a couple years now. I've done some Arduino and Raspberry Pi projects. So I'm familiar with some of the maker spaces. You know, which is what interested me about the email. And I'm not really sure what this group does yet. And so I was just listening in.
Well, sometimes we're not sure what we do either. You know, sometimes we just, you know, mostly we just get together to discuss any current topics, any thoughts. In the past, we have had people bring like, hey, I have this kind of issue that I'm looking for more brains to think about. You know, and try to come up with basically a solution on the spot. We haven't been doing a whole lot of that lately. Mostly we, you know, kind of end up talking about 3D printers or some current kind of thought. And, you know, we just kind of talk about any topic that might be related. And today, my kind of questions to the group is there's going to be a Makers Day space at ATIA, a national conference in Florida coming up in a couple of weeks. And my question would be, you know, if you are going or if you were going to a Makers Day, what kinds of things would you want to see from just your own personal perspective? What kind of things would be exciting to have at that space? So anybody who has an idea of you know, off the top of their head, what might be interesting, I would love to hear it. Ken, I'm sure you have 6 things already in your head.
I think it's currently at 30, but
Yeah.
You know, one thing I'd love to have is if I were just a freestyling maker, I would love to know how to get tied in with other maker activities.
With other maker activities or people?
Yes. And that's AT Maker, of course, not just Maker.
Yeah.
I'd also like to know where's a good place to go get ideas for things that are needed. So projects, how do you even come up with projects? Like-
Other than makers making change?
Other than, yeah. So for example, if I am really interested and have time, and I want to find some new project, I'll go to the AT Makers and Users Facebook group and just see what's getting posted.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope that there are also other kinds of places you could go to find out where there are needs.
Right. And then Marilee wrote, I work in a school and have an OT background. I would love to see a line guide for helping students write on the line or within a defined space. And Mary, is that something other than like there's line guides that you can purchase that are the whole sheet line guides, like letter writing guides? You're looking for like more flexible designs? Yes, okay, yeah, that would be interesting, okay. Well, if you want to pop on and talk, you're welcome to. We can all deal with a little background noise. While I take notes. Yeah, anybody else have things that, like if you felt like you went into a maker space and be like, yeah, that's awesome, I want to see that.
Could you be where are you going with this, Scout? What are you?
No,
you-
so at ATIA, so the Makers Day, I'm curious, like, just what people would want there. What would, if there's something like, oh, it'd be really cool if I had a way to see this or to do this or to find out how somebody does this piece. That's all I'm kind of looking for. Like, I've only been to Maker Day once, and so like that's my experience.
So I recommended to the IATP staff, because I should say I've been to ATIA for numerous years, but that's no longer on my list in my post-retirement role. But we will have quite a few staff there, and they're going to be their first time and their first experience. And I said, no, don't worry about it. Just go and take it all in and learn your way around. And you'll be burnt out by Saturday morning anyway. And then you can decide and make better choices for the following year, if that's what you do. Based on that, I think there's enough people doing things that I don't know if you'd get them on board with it, but I would be more leaning towards developing a track of presentations or at least some coordinated ones that cover the gamut from, sort of that whole spectrum of being, with Therese at the, simple, go to your hardware store, pick it up, which she covers, and has for years, right? On simple, low cost materials and things to do, to a more complex, as more and more people are getting 3D printers and finding out, no, it doesn't work just like your computer printer. You don't get to just send the file and have it magically appear, you know. And just what's cutting edge, what's coming, you know, what more about considerations in the whole designing and prototyping and filaments. One of the issues that we keep dealing with is we're also launching a kitchen program, an accessible kitchen program that's targeted at teaching, and including AT, right? Mostly funded through for consumers through the Rehabilitation Services Department. But of course, everybody wants us to print food-related items. And they see that people are printing food-related items. And there's a lot of issues with that. And so when we said, no, we're not doing that, you know, then we had to get into explaining why we won't touch that. So that in itself, to me, is things to be concerned about when you're printing, what the purpose is, issues related to, you know, sanitization and bacteria, because just because it appears to be a hard piece of plastic doesn't mean you can easily clean it. So I think there's room for more advanced topics.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think there is kind of a maker track. Bill, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I know there are definitely sessions related, very maker related. Yeah, and I haven't looked to see like how progressive they are. I know Teresa's doing, I think two. And Ken, you're, I assume, doing one.
What are you doing, Ken?
So I think mine is an AAC one, so it involves 3D printed elements, but and actually I hope people have some energy Friday morning, because that's my presentation time, or Saturday morning rather. And the title of the presentation is Next Gen Tactile Symbols, 3D Printed Bliss Symbolics. So it's really focused on a particular kind of communication approach, device, whatever, but it does involve 3D printed elements.
Great. Courtney will be there.
Excellent. We could always use at least somebody in the audience.
Yeah, I'm writing this down to go back and highlight it. I printed out the schedule. I've gotten as far as Thursday night, I think. There's a lot on there. But yeah,
Yes.
I will definitely
Speaking of which, there is a informal get-together Thursday evening,
Mhm.
right after, if you may already know about this, right after the last session at the poolside bar for 3D printing stuff.
Nice.
Everyone is welcome has that interest.
Ken, have you done much with printing switches?
Yes, I have lots of prototypes and proofs of concept, because mostly that was what I was interested in. 3D Makers Making Change has a switch, includes some of the elements I came up with, but they've actually had workshops where they've had multiple people build it. I want to take their design and make it even simpler. I have some ideas for how to do that, but I would look to their, I think it's called MMC 60, something like that switch, because it's 60 millimeters across.
Okay. Yeah, we're working on printing one with the conductive filament.
Yeah, it's not going to work. I did go down that path, and you can check out one of that that approach that I tried to take. There's too much resistance in conductive filament. I even tried conductive glues, and that's another design I tried. it's not going to work yet until you can start actually 3D printing copper. Then maybe.
Okay.
Mm.
Does anybody know, with, enabling devices which supplied, was a resource for a lot of people, purchase switches through them. And then we had an issue come up where somebody couldn't get a pancake switch, and apparently that was, the classic COVID supply chain issues. And then they've gone to now printing all their own switches, but I don't know if they're actually doing it or if they use somebody else to do that, or what's going on just in the vendor world around that. Has anybody heard anything? I'm just curious.
What was the beginning of that, Kathy? I missed it. I missed the beginning of that question.
Just wondering, that, there's other people supplying switches, but enabling devices have,
Oh.
been around for years doing switches, and just that the supply chain dried up. So if it dried up for them, I'm
Mhm.
guessing it dried up for a lot of other folks.
Right.
And so they've decided that they were going to make their own switches and 3D print their own switches. And I don't know exactly to
Mhm.
what extent they're doing that or whether they're contracting that out. And I was just curious if you've heard anything with other folks having trouble obtaining other types of switches related to just supply chain issues.
Right, switches
on.
or components, maybe. No, and, the guy I've worked with, Mike Buckley, I think he's from Arizona. He's done, let's see. Yeah, he's from Arizona. He's done, made a bunch of switches. I don't know where he falls in the whole category.
Okay.
That's surprising that there be a supply chain issue here. These things is probably the most complex thing they include if they're not Bluetooth. If they're just wired switches, the most complex thing they have is a micro switch inside them, and there's no supply chain issue there.
Yeah. Yeah, Ken Barnabas will have a table at ATIA regarding his Bluetooth puck item. So if you see him there, talk to him about switches.
Okay.
If I could, I want to come back to the question near the top of this rabbit hole. Scout, you were asking about what people might be interested in seeing at a Maker Day type event. And just a little bit of additional context for that. The planning for that is, well, it always goes up to the last minute, and it's going up to the last minute right now in terms of what content might be there. Scout, I don't know about you, but I've been asked to do a booth there and have no idea what in the heck I'm going to do, if anything, or if I'm still just going to say thanks anyway. I also proposed to Judy and Therese that maybe you and I should talk. But I would say
FYI, I'm talking to Judy later today.
great. So the things that people have asked me about the most recently that I don't have a good answer for, so I'm not volunteering for any of this, but that question of 3D scanning comes up a lot. So to be able to show the powers and the pitfalls of that, I think would be potentially beneficial. Also, there is that whole question of things that go in that would potentially be in the mouth, things for eating. I don't know. There's certainly no good way to put together a demonstration right now that quickly of why that's problematic, or that there is emerging work that says maybe it's not as problematic as we think it is. So I think those are the two topics I've been getting the most questions about that I can't answer. Personally, I'm really interested in 3D printing with materials other than PLA. Recognizing, the technical difficulties of printing with TPU or PETG, but the applications for different materials and why, examples of what you can do and why, and even just mixed materials beyond 3D printing.
Yeah, so TPU is a piece of cake. So I wouldn't let that.
Says you.
I mean, if you have, especially if you have a direct drive extruder, piece of cake. If you have a Bowden tube, it might be a little bit more difficult, but even then it's not terrible. I only do two things. That's PLA and TPU. And TPU is nice because it's really, we talk about nylon, this stuff's way too complex. But TPU is, you can put it in the dishwasher. This is an experiment I did. I put it in a dishwasher for must be like 20 cycles, and it didn't lose any, it lost a little color. That was it. It stayed just as flexible, just as dimensionally perfect as 3D printing gets. It didn't lose anything dimensionally. So I would say, that, and it's non-toxic according to its data sheet. So if you were going to experiment with something that at least is around food, I think I'd want to pursue TPU and see whether that has value. I don't go near nylon or carbon fiber. These things are way too hard to work with. And in my work, I target the novice 3D printer or the library. They're not going to have nylon or carbon fiber. Because if you go with those kind of materials, first of all, you're in commercial land at that point, trying to compete with people who have much better manufacturing processes, and like I said, you've lost a ton of potential makers by choosing those kinds of materials.
So
I have a question for you guys. So Scout and Bill, I've heard about this maker thing at ATIA, and I can't find anything about it. So if I go to the schedule at a glance, it's not there. If I look at the session list, it's not there. Rumor has it it's on Saturday, but that's all I know is a rumor. How can that be?
I didn't understand why it wasn't clear on the schedule. That didn't make sense to me, but I have no in with the powers that be at ATIA.
So when is it?
So it's
Saturday, 9 to 12.
9
Yeah.
to 12.
And
In the exhibit hall?
historically, it's been that way. It's in the back of the vendor hall, and it's chaotic and loud and crowded. If it represents years past. So if you walk into the vendor hall and shoot to the back, that would get you there.
Okay, so it's where it was 2 years ago anyway.
And it's mostly tables set up and people at the tables trying to make something out of, that they can walk away with rather quickly, which of course, 3D printing does not lend itself to this kind of activity.
Agreed.
And that's part of the reason I'm asking is that there will be, I'm sure, components of like, come up to this table, do these 3 steps and walk away with something. But I am also very interested in coming up to the table and just getting some information, and maybe it is a table where we're going to talk about like, is this, why is food problematic when you combine it with 3D printing or whatever it is, but like, what is the thing that you want to come in and talk about or see? Because obviously we're not going to, Bill and I aren't going to be 3D printing at ATIA. I don't think anybody's hauling their printer. but what is something other than, putting together your popsicle sticks and foam to make something? What are people interested in seeing there? Like last year, I took a balloon wind tunnel, this big contraption that, a couple people actually went onto Twitter and, showed that they had made it, and it's kind of fun and cool, geared towards students, and some other things, and that's all I did. I don't know if it was worthwhile or not.
Well, Scout, that was one of the more popular stations last year, and I think there were a couple of reasons why. One, it didn't involve 3D printing. You could make that out of materials from Ace Hardware today, right? So it was eminently accessible from a you can do this standpoint is one. Two, it was big and it was flashy and it caught attention. You could see from across the room that there was something going on. And three, it was different. So every year there is a station there that has a 3D printer and it's cranking away slowly and it's going to be going the entire time. And somebody can say, well, here's what the finished product is going to look like. But you aren't actually hands-on with it. And then there's always somebody there doing an iPad mount. There's always somebody there talking about basic Switch adaptations. And so those things, to a novice, there are always people there who are interested in those things. There's not a whole lot on like a big room scale toy that somebody could work with. So it was novel. So in terms of like things to look for, what's going to be novel that people could take home, not take home physically, but take home the idea and do today, or at least be inspired to do something similar today. I think that's what made that so successful. And that's also why, 2018 or 19, where it was in the other end of the conference center and it was a much smaller space, really crowded. That was overly crowded, but the most successful activity there spanned across 3 or 4 different tables that addressed 3D printing, Switch adapting toys, and soldering, all in sequence. So a bunch of us 3D printed Switch casings ahead of time. We each committed to making, 10 or 20 of them. And then people who came through could see a 3D printer in action printing the Switch casing. And we said, here is a finished Switch casing. They could take it to the next station and learn to solder up a Switch, and actually soldered a Switch right there, even if they had never done it before, mounted it inside the casing, took it to the next station to test it and hook it up to a toy that had already been pre-wired for Switch adaptation. And then they had one splayed open with the stuffing falling out so that you could see how it was wired. And I think they might have even had a couple of spares handy with seam rippers that people could get into. So the demonstration part is really useful, but boy, that was a sequence of things where people could come and pick up 2 or 3 skills right there that they could take back and apply right away. Now, it was far too crowded in that space. Where it is now, there's a lot more room. Something like that could be really successful.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Courtney just put in there. I love the hands-on learning. And that's the thing for me. That sounds so great. That's the kind of activity. I don't care what I take home. I want to do something. I want to learn something. I want, and I don't even care if I ever use it, to be able to go in and say, oh, that's a thing. Even if I just talk about it to somebody else, I just think that's really cool. And I don't have capacity to, have 4 soldering irons there, but I was actually thinking about taking tools for people just to say, it might be dumb, but here's how you cut PVC. Here's how you make a holder for a PVC cutter if you can't squeeze it. you know, here are tools that you can work with this material or that material in a, you know, safer way. And, you know, some people won't care a thing about it, which is great, but, you know, anybody who hasn't done it, I did some maker sessions with our state schools, and, you know, sent everybody tools, and they were just like, this isn't working. It's like, no, here's how you use it. And one woman who just used a PVC pipe cutter, she was like, I am throwing out the jig, the box, you know, I'm dropping the name right now. She's like, I'm never using that again. The pipe cutters are so easy.
Yeah, so you know, Scott, that's a really good point, and that's something I have to deal with my Go Baby Go project. Every year, new students come in, and I forget. Oh, I'm going to have to spend a day or two teaching them how to use PVC pipe cutters, how to use a wire stripper, how to use a wrench or a drill. I mean, things that I take for granted that I've been doing since I was 12 that I realize, oh, a lot of people aren't. And that's the barrier. People who think, boy, that's really cool. I just don't know how to do that. And we're showing them how to use a 3D printer where there are much more basic maker skills that maybe that ought to be a station where we bring in, we each pack a bag full of tools and it's just, okay, what here do you not recognize? What do you want to be able to make? And we tell you it's really easy. You can build this frame for your balloon wind tunnel out of PVC pipe. And they go, well, I don't know how to cut PVC pipe. Game over.
Or it looks like a great idea. That's for me. It looks like a great idea, but because they've never done this or that skill, it's one of those, I'll do it in the future. I'll do it in the future. As opposed to when you have the skills in your pocket, you're like, oh, I can just do that. Yeah.
And having a couple of people at a station with a couple dozen tools and saying, what do you want to learn how to do? Could be really powerful, preferably with examples. So I'm not suggesting you need to pack up your whole wind tunnel again, but something made from PVC, and they say, cool, but I don't know how to do this. Great. Here's how.
Right. And last year, what I did was had a QR code to how to, you know, to a video where you could learn how to build it. And even if it is just a, you know, you go to this website and you see all these things built from this material or that material.
Yeah. And, you know, the other answer really, the easier way to get that information that I don't think enough people realize is you go to YouTube and type PVC pipe cutter, or you go to YouTube and type how to solder, and you're going to find it. But again, providing that information is something that it's enough of a barrier that people don't know that they can cross that easily.
Well, I certainly hope you could teach as many people as possible how to use a wire stripper, because I think of that as a potential barrier to building one of these that has all kinds of great capabilities, but they have to be able to cut a wire and strip it. And that's the most complex task to build this. I worry about that being a barrier.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I think we have a task ahead of us.
If you want to propose that to them, God, I don't have enough to do over the next couple of weeks, but I can sit Kyle Ann on helping to put together some ideas, and I can pack a bag full of stuff and work with you on that. Yeah,
I think if Kyle Ann has a little bit of flexibility in.
I'm joking. She doesn't. She's at like 200%, but I can do it.
We can make it happen. I have some flexibility. All right. Well, anyway. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I think I have somebody crawling around in my ceiling.
Oh, Jason, you buy nicer tools than I do. It's the Harbor Freight special for me, man. But I like it.
I'm gonna take a look. Oh yeah. Well, if I can get a couple, you know, because I think that sometimes is a factor, having the right tool for the job. And, you know, I will admit I'm the one who has pulled out my pocket knife to do some wire stripping in. and it's not the best. You know, and that's, I think, also part of the discussion is if you're gonna do this more than, you know, 4 times, having the tool is great.
Yeah, I think it would be great to add something on just developing people's confidence with simple tools, whether it be the wire stripper or pipe cutter, or, you know, realizing there's different sizes and different thicknesses and why you would use one material over the other. And,
Mhm.
you know, it was one of the things that happened with, you know, years ago, there was the switch building classes and everybody had this solder kits and stuff, and it moved away from that to, oh, we can do a solderless switch. And so now we'll teach people how to make a solderless switch, which is good, but there was something to be said for people learning how to use and do simple soldering and developing that skill. And that kind of went by the wayside. And so I think bringing that back and helping people just use some of these simple tools and where to find them, at whether you're a Harbor Freight fan or Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace Hardware or whatever it is, you know, Amazon.com, but what to look
Right.
for, what not to look for.
I think it unlocks people's creativity when you get past that. As much I love Therese and I love the things she puts out into the world, but when you watch a 30-second YouTube video that just zips through and you cut the PVC pipe to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't know how to do that, it can be an immediate turnoff. But I think what this potentially does is it opens up people beyond, well, good, now I can make the things that Therese makes, to also say, oh, and now that I know the tool exists and how to use it, then I see problems differently, and can come up with my own solutions and my own devices. So they're the ones submitting sessions next year.
Right, right. Well, I just noticed that our time, we are almost at the top of the hour. So if anybody has any last comments or questions, now would be the time to wiggle them in.
So Scott, at the
If
next meeting, I really would like to bring up the concept of ChatGPT and what it could do for in an AAC environment.
Say it again, chat what?
ChatGPT, chat with capital G, capital T, well, whatever those letters are, GPT. It has a lot of notoriety right now, and I think where it would really help in this world is real-time communication for people who are non-speaking. So that's always been the holy grail of AAC, is how do I hold a real-time communication with somebody rather than give me 3 minutes while I put together my phrase. How do you hold, and nobody has the patience for that. So how do you hold a real-time conversation? I think this may be the breakthrough technology for that.
Okay, we can put it on the agenda.
Thanks.
I've played with that, and it is very promising. You know, especially when you have a gap in coding language or you run into a pitfall. It's been very useful in terms of just trying to get stuff done. It's a little scary how good it is right out the box, and that it's free.
All right, well, Jason, you are now required to come to our February meeting. So, so you've just signed yourself up. All right, well, thanks, everybody. I'm gonna say we're gonna end here, or we will go over our time. Yep, and if there's other things for next month, just put them in your pocket, or you can email me or Naomi. All right. For now.